Hi, my name is Maceo Lewis, and welcome to ML Sports Talk. Hit the subscribe button so you can see more commentary from the world of sports from me. Today, I want to talk about the pay us what you owe us message from the WNBA players. And look, I have a lot to say about this topic. I actually created a video and tried to submit it, but YouTube wouldn't allow me. It was more than 15 minutes, so I had a mouthful to say. So I'm going to try to pare it down and cut it short. So look, if I don't cover anything, it's probably because I'm trying to keep this short and stay focused on certain key points. But look, to make a long story short, I watched the game the other day. Terrible game, but I did notice that the players were wearing these "Pay Us What You Owe Us" shirts, and immediately I was on board with the message. I totally agree with the message. Clearly, the players are going through negotiations right now to collective bargaining. They opted out of the current collective bargaining, and now they're in the process of trying to negotiate, obviously, for higher wages, salary cap, and other issues like maternity benefits and stuff. But for the purpose of discussion, I'm going to talk mostly about salaries. But that's not to say that there are not other issues involved in terms of what's being negotiated. Okay. So look, I started watching WNBA last season, and primarily because of Caitlin Clark. She drew me in, and I hadn't watched the WNBA for over 2.5 decades. After I saw one game, back in the 1990s, I concluded it wasn't for me. It wasn't until Caitlin Clark where I was drawn in. And look, my wife and I became big fans of the WNBA last season. We followed the local Sparks in LA, and we go to Vegas a lot. So it's an excuse to go to Vegas to watch the Aces. So we followed them too. And look, I like a whole bunch of teams like the Liberty, the Lynx, the Fever, and I saw a lot of great NBA players, WNBA players. After I saw was drawn in by Caitlin Clark, such as Wilson, Stewie, Chelsea Gray, Angel Reese, Plum, Fee, Boston. I mean, there's a whole bunch of players that I'm forgetting here. But basically, there is talent. There are definitely talented players in the WNBA. They're very entertaining to watch. They're very skilled, and I enjoy watching them, and I'm going to continue to watch them. But look, the history just wasn't there in comparing with the men's sport and the women's sport, and that's part of the problem. But anyway, so look, I grew up watching Lakers, Dodgers, Raiders when they were in LA and in the 80s and early 90s. So I was cultivated to becoming a sports fan for the men's sports, but for the women's sports, they just weren't present. So when the WNBA started in like the late 90s, I just gave it a try, and after one watch, I said, you know what, it's not for me, right? But today you have little girls now that are looking up to these female athletes, right? And they're looking up to them. They're saying, hey, look, if she can do it, I can do it. And there's resources now where these young girls playing clubs and extracurricular activities are playing basketball. They're competing against each other. I know personally because I have family members that have young girls, nieces, that are playing in these leagues. I have coworkers that also have daughters and nieces that are playing, and so the infrastructure is there, but it can lead there's room for improvement. Let's put it that way. Okay. So look, this is great for women's sports. The young girls are working on their skills. They're learning the value of teamwork, and when they see that these women players, that the salaries are going up and that society is valuing them, and they can earn a decent wage or a decent living and focus on their craft, then that's gonna create more opportunities to find like the next Caitlin Clarks that's gonna generate even greater interest, even more attention, more revenues, more increase in value of the organization. All right. So look, last year I was totally shocked to learn at how little the salaries were the WNBA players. In 2024 alone, the minimum salary was 64,000 to 76,000. All right, compare that with the men, where if you look at the inexperienced NBA player, the minimum salary is 1.1 million. A 1 year player is 1.8 billion. The maximum salary for the WNBA player is 241,000. Okay, the team cap is 1.4 million. That's team salary cap. And if you count the 12 teams, you multiply that by 12 because the Valkyries weren't around last year, it was 17.6 million. So when you compare the numbers, a NBA player with zero experience is making just 300 shy of the entire salary cap of one WNBA team, and one experienced NBA player is making more than the entire salary cap of the WNBA team, and a handful of players, I would say about 38 out of the 570 or so NBA players last year, are actually making more than the entire cap combined of all the 12 WNBA teams from last year, the 7.6 million. So look, you can look at salaries of women across the country to show that there's clearly a wage gap issue. The average salary in 2024 for women, it was about 56,000 was the average, compared to the overall national average of 62,000. In California, I think that the average was 88,000. The median salary for women was 56,000, so roughly the same as the average nationally, and 62,000 overall nationally, if you add up everyone, not counting gender. So look, there's a salary gap, there's a wage gap that women have experienced for generations and generations. It's still going on right now. And when you look at other professions, I mean, it kind of explains why some people sort of scoff at the notion of athletes asking for more money. And I think it's because, like, a lot of people, they already make either the same or less money than the WNBA players. And frankly, there are people who don't think that athletes should be paid millions of dollars, like, because they don't see their profession as valuable as other professions like teachers and firefighters and stuff like that, right? But look, I think it's a function of market, and I'll get to the market argument about the women in a second. But I think when you are a private business like the NBA and the NFL, and you see a market opportunity to make billions of dollars, and you've obviously grew that over decades and decades, right? And we as consumers value the product, so we pay for it when we watch it on TV, when we pay our subscription packages, when we go to the games, obviously, when we buy at the concession stands. We either support it with our finances, with our attention. Don't forget advertising. The media rights are huge in terms of sports. And there's other factors involved in terms of how fans value and treat sports. So if owners are going to make billions of dollars, I think the players deserve a significant, substantial portion of that. Okay, so that's why I think the players should be more. So when I say market forces, that's what I'm talking about. All right, now look, the larger issue here is the gender wage gap. Okay, and that's basically what they're fighting. So I'm not going to get into it because that's probably going to take up a lot of my YouTube 15 minutes time. But what I see here in terms of the arguments against the women, it has to do with the revenue generation of the WNBA and the popularity. People will say things like, "Oh, it's just economics. Oh, the market determines salaries." So I mean, if people cared about the women more, they would get paid more. It basically comes down to blaming the female athletes, and they don't put responsibility on the actual owners who are responsible for generating interest in their product and promoting the WNBA. But look, it's more a systemic problem. It's linked to the lack of investment in the growth of women's sports for decades. And look, I'm not saying that there hasn't been any growth in women's sports. There certainly has, obviously with Title IX. And obviously, like I mentioned, that I have nieces and coworkers have daughters that are participating in sports now. But the comparison between the women and the men in terms of the investment is still treated differently. For women, it's not treated, until recently, it wasn't treated like a business like with men, because women, they have less prime time slots on media and on television. They have minimal marketing dollars. They have second tier facilities. There's a whole bunch of factors in terms of how women are treated differently from men. It has nothing to do with their talent or their entertainment value. Okay, women, they are talented, they are entertaining, their skill levels are high, they have the star power. It's just that the opportunities in terms of investment, there's a bias between how men's sports are viewed, how those institutions I just mentioned invest in sports versus how they treat the women. And so, look, the owners, they need to create fair and sustainable careers for these athletes, because when the little girls, when they see that the players are getting paid and they can actually make a living doing something they love, that's just going to create more opportunities for these leagues to find the next Caitlin Clark, the next person with the star power that's going to generate more revenue and create more profits down the road for the WNBA, and obviously with the NBA because they own the part of the WNBA. But with less investment, less resources, you're going to have less revenue and less pay. So look, the owners, they need to work with sponsors, and the sponsors need to put up more money, and that's going to help the sponsors because that's going to create brand loyalty. The networks, they need to create airtime in those prime time slots, and obviously that's going to help with ratings. And then they basically need to promote the product like they do with the men. And then the owners obviously have an interest because they want to increase the value of the team. Now the fans, we need to demand better because look, should we be telling the NBA how to spend their money? You darn right we should, because we're the customers. Okay, if you have stock in Amazon or you own, you have Amazon Prime, you have a right to tell Amazon how they treat their employees. It's the same concept, and I'm sure the NBA is listening to the fans, and they want to take that into consideration and decide what they want to pay for, what they want to invest in, and what value they're providing overall to their customers. And we pay through TV subscriptions, through YouTube channel subscription, or whatever service you have. We pay with the NBA, WNBA packages, ticket prices, concessions. We pay with our time and our attention that we give. And look, I'm just I have a small, I make no money in this YouTube channel, but I'm just a small drop in the big ocean. But the market itself is made of a bunch of little molecules, right? So we all have a collective interest in terms of the value of the product that we're receiving from the NBA, and we have a right to tell them what we like and don't like. Okay, and look, I didn't like the game that I saw last night. I tell them that. Look, I'm gonna be honest about what I like and don't like of the WNBA, but this I don't like. The less pay that they have. Okay, the pay discrepancy between men and women, and I'm gonna talk about what I think it should be. But look, we do have a right to speak, and I think that's going to help the WNBA players in terms of their negotiation when they're negotiating for competitive salaries. And that's what they're ultimately owe, is what they negotiate. And I think we as fans can help them in terms of negotiations by speaking out about what's fair and what's not. So look, the point is, and I'm getting close to my 15 minutes here, we as a society can do better in terms of how we view and how we treat and value women. Fans should demand and have the right to speak up and let the NBA know what's right. The net losses is not the players' responsibility. That's the responsibility of the owners. The owners need to market better. They need to get more sponsors, improve their product, invest in player opportunities. The WNBA players are negotiating right now, so they're telling you what their worth is, and we should stand by them. We shouldn't be shaming them or mocking them because they're telling the owners what they're worth. Look, I see a lot of memes about people saying, "Oh, I deserve NBA money. I owe the NBA money. The NBA subsidizes you." Well, first of all, the WNBA players are not demanding NBA money, and I'm not demanding NBA money. Okay, we see the comparisons to show that there's a huge salary gap. Right, and then the NBA does not owe the NBA. The players don't owe the NBA anything. This is an investment for the NBA. They have a 50% ownership and more with the 60%. It's a little bit complicated situation, but basically, practically speaking, the NBA owes 60% of the WNBA. So they have a financial interest in keeping the WNBA afloat. And then if they do eventually sell down the road, they can treat those. I mean, obviously, a tax person will be more better than this, but that's like a capital expense when they eventually sell. So, I mean, this is all part of, both profits as well as the NBA wanting to create a lesser discrepancy in terms of the wage or the salary gap in treating women's sports like men's sports. There's a huge gap, and the NBA is involved in trying to close that gap, and they should continue to do that by increasing the salaries, by increasing a larger percentage of the revenue. Right now it's 9.3%. The men are getting 50%. It should be somewhere in between. And what that number is, I can't tell you what the exact number is, but that's why it's called negotiations. So they need to negotiate it, and whatever they negotiate, that is what they will then be owed with the new collective bargaining agreement. So that's my thoughts on the issue. Hit the subscribe button so you can see more commentary about the world of sports. And until next time.